Dear guests, at the beginning of the new millennium in the year 2000, Greet de Keyzer made a radical career switch. She gave up her steady job as a foreign reporter in Belgium to start up VRT's first foreign office in the United States. And what meant to be a one-year overseas stint became an adventure of 15 years and still counting. Please clap your hands together for Greet de Keyzer.
Well, thank you so much. Well, it's always really nice for me to be here. I still live in the US. I still live in Washington, D.C. I left 15 years ago. Well, I did the career switch. I switched my job here in Brussels for a job in the US. I am still an employee for VRT at this moment, but I took the decision to stay there. And when I left like 15 years ago, I went there to make reports and for the news and for Terzaka at that time. And I was a little bit surprised, I was surprised about society. There were a lot of surprises, but I was also surprised because I'm here to talk about failing forward. Well, failing was at that time, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, here in Belgium, well, it was a taboo. You even didn't talk about it. If you failed, well, you know what, you shut up. And some people just moved to the other side of the country. Nobody wanted to talk about failures. Well, I came to the US, and there suddenly I did some reports about the economy, about companies, about startups. I went to Silicon Valley, and suddenly, failure was not a taboo anymore. Failure was just part of doing business. Failure in the US is the path to success. And if you looked for a job, for example, if you were like 25 years at the same company, well, that was a minus. That was not a plus. At that time here in Belgium, if you job hopped too much, then people would think you would be unreliable. In the US, it's taking risks and then maybe being confronted with a failure. That's an added value. It's a sign of strength. Failure, if you fail, you're not a loser, not at all. You become a loser in the US if you don't start again. Well, there is a lot of work done, and it's embedded in the American society that failure is part of it. The economical life and the companies we are in right now, technology, for example, makes failure a lot more part of doing business. When I went for the first time to Silicon Valley, for example, I talked with seed investors, with angel investors, and those people really deal with startups. Well, if you read Forbes, and I do that every single week, I just go through Forbes. Well, this year, Forbes wrote that 80% of the startups in the US will fail. But that's not a negative thing. It is part of doing business. And I will repeat that a couple of more times because it is the guarantee that there is a lot of activity. So no failure would mean like no activity. The cycle of innovation makes failure just more and more part of your business. And I heard that a couple of people already gave the example of Edison. Of course, he failed. He said like, well, 10,000 times, and it's because it wouldn't work. But did he consider himself a failure? No. There were people like Steve Jobs, the inventor of the Dyson vacuum cleaner, for example. I don't know if it's really famous here, but he became, in 10 years' time, he became a billionaire. He tried 3,723 different models before he decided to bring it to the market. He had to sell his house, his wife had to go working, but that's all part of the deal. He is a millionaire. He's worth $13 billion at this moment, so he did good since 1993. That's not that long just to become a billionaire. Well, and I could see that within my own friends, for example, the group of friends that I have there. I know a couple of people that started to invest in a system. When they were working on the new healthcare law, everybody knew that it was coming. Well, a couple of people, they started working on online platforms to integrate the whole system, to attract customers, to go to healthcare companies, for example. Well, they invested everything they had, and they didn't succeed. Well, they are succeeding right now, but 2 years ago there was no money coming in. Well, they, in a heartbeat, they said like, okay, we sell the house, we go and live in an apartment. And at this moment, they are going to buy a house again. Nobody looked at them as like, really, you must be really dumb or you must be really a loser. No, everybody said like, okay, good. Did you start over, and did you analyze what went wrong? Because that is a big thing. Analyzing within your business what went wrong. And a lot of people know what went wrong, but getting the opportunity to start again. If you go to investors in the US with your story about your failure, about your former companies, and you prove that you really know what went wrong and that you have an alternative plan, well, you will get money again. You will get or continue to get the support of a lot of people. Well, here in Belgium still it is difficult to continue getting that support, and it's a lot more difficult to get private investors, for example, to invest in your business. It is changing a lot, but if you compare a business model of, like, let's say 100 years ago, well, innovation was not part of a business model at this time. And I would say to young people that start a business, well, you know what, build in flexibility, and flexibility is also part of a formula that implicates failure, partial failure. Failure doesn't mean the end of your business, and that's the biggest message that I wanted to bring here. And in the US, if you go into a store or you go to a website, you go to Amazon, and you just type in failure, and you're looking for books, you're looking for courses, you get a zillion different things, because there's so many gurus, success gurus, they call them. Well, they, of course, they go to people that failed, give them courses, and nobody is ashamed about it. It's just part of building a profitable business and do it the right way, I would say. So, failure is doing business the right way in the US. So it doesn't mean you are a loser. Steve Jobs, when he created Apple, for example, well, he was fired from his first company when he invented and when he put a lot of money in a system that didn't work. So, but when he changed the hardware, so he was very stubborn, and he knew where he was going. He was fired by his own company. He continued working on the system, and I think it was like a year and a half in between. Well, when he just rectified all the mistakes in his system, he stepped to the company. He built Apple, and he built it, and one of the biggest companies in the US. So it is really not a problem, and I would say more and more young people, just please build in that flexibility. Don't be afraid. You know, when I come back, because I'm still employed by VRT, but I decided to stay in the US. I, together with my partner, we created 2 restaurants who do very good business in the US. So I decided not to come back. So if VRT doesn't have any job for me in the US anymore, well, you know, it will come to an end. My contract with VRT will come to an end. If I say that in the US, nobody of my friends will say like, "Oh, really? That is really bad." No, you know, everybody. The first question I get is like, "Oh, and what are you going to do then?" So here in Belgium, I still get those like ooh and ahs, like ooh, and that's then the end of your career. Of course not. It's not the end of my career. I'm slowly preparing myself for another career outside of VRT and DK Communications. I created that last year, so it's my company in the US, and that is what I will do. Is that a bad thing for me that I have to change my career? No, I talked to VRT about, you know, being still active in the US, and I don't want to come back to Belgium. I don't want to leave my life. I don't want to leave my partner that I have in the US. Is that a problem? No, but you take the consequences, and taking the consequences, there's nothing wrong with that. And I have to say, like, I'm in my 50s, so, you know, I'm not very young anymore, but in the US, it's not a problem. And I was a little bit surprised just to hear from some people that, you know, it's not that big of a problem anymore. But when I left 15 years ago, 50 plus was like, if you had to change your career then, well, it was the end of your career. Well, it's not the case anymore, and I have to say that, you know, people say like the Americanization of our society is going on. I don't think it's Americanization of the society here, but you know, the adaptation, flexibility, and just staying alive within a very fast changing world is failing forward is definitely a part of it, and you know, failing forward can be a lot of fun. So I hope that, you know, you come to the US, talk to US businesses, for example. And I see, being in Washington, D.C., I see more and more Belgian companies that contact me because they just want to create an environment here in their own businesses here that is a little more open, that is a little more flexible, that is a little more adapted to technological innovations, because the innovations, the whole cycle goes faster and faster and faster. One could be very successful inventing a technological item 1 year, and within the next year there will be a better system, and your old system will fail then because the better system will take over. Well, it's part of what you, especially people in technology, will have to deal with. And you know, being creative is the best guarantee, and being active, and just contact people that you want to talk to, and go and ask for advice. It will be very positive for you, and nobody will consider you as a loser because you don't know. Why? Why don't you have the right not to know and just learn? Go with your plans, go with your analysis, and even if you don't have an answer on if you know what went wrong but don't know how to solve your problems, well, go to people that are in the business that you trust, and there is definitely not in the US. You know, if somebody read Steve Jobs' book, he talks about how people would contact him, and everybody would say like, "Oh yeah, but you know, you cannot ask Steve Jobs about a certain problem." Maybe not in the last 5 years of his life. But he was very open to people that dare to take the step and to go and ask him. And I'm very sure that, the mentality here, especially with the younger business owners, is exactly the same thing. People that dare to take that step, cross that border, that people will respect that, and people will favor those people over people that say like, well, I failed and I think that I have to go on a lower profile right now and just shut up and don't make a lot of noise anymore. Well, that's not the way, and I see it changing here, but that's the way that it goes in the US. As long as you're active, as long as you try to change whatever needs to be changed, you get new money and you start a new business, and if it is your second or your third business in 10 years' time, but you can prove that that you have a goal, that you have a plan. You will not get money for free from investors. You never get money for free. That's very certain. But if you can prove that you have a plan and that you believe in that plan, you will get support. And you might fail. Why not? But you will do better next time. So they asked me to give you guys all the possibility to ask me a lot of questions. So I would say, like, shoot, and ask me what you want. Yep. There are no questions. And then
you've caused a lot of buzz on Twitter, a lot of tweets praising your presentation. So thank you for that. But I assume your message came through very clearly, because none of them were questions. So.
Yeah, well, and don't be afraid. When we opened our first Belgian restaurant in Washington, D.C. 10 years ago, we celebrated Belga Café, 10 years of Belga Café. Well, we had a plan. My partner is a chef. He was a chef with Roger Souverains and moved to the US. We met in Washington, D.C. Well, he wanted to open a restaurant there, and I told him, I said, like, well, there is no Belgian restaurants in the whole of Washington, D.C. So why don't you call your cuisine, your kitchen, Belgian food, real Belgian food? Well, a lot of people, and I have to say, a lot of Belgians that lived in Washington, D.C. advised us, like, no, don't do that. The Americans don't know Belgian. They don't know Belgian cuisine. Call it French cuisine. Why not? Or call it European cuisine. Well, no, we were stubborn and we went for the Belgian cuisine. It was a success from day one. We have the second restaurant right now, and we're still happy doing business. So go for it, take the risk, and go for it. Thank you.
Now, one of the tweets still is a question. Karen is wondering whether you one time hit the wall by making all those plans and.
Well, I have to tell you, sometimes you hit the wall in a very comfortable way. I did hit the wall. Yeah, when I realized that I had my life, so I went to be honest, I went to the US with a 1-year contract for VRT. VRT wanted me to open their first office there and to cover the presidential elections. That was in the year 2000. Well, I was there and I said, like, I don't know if I want to live in the US. Well, I really liked it there. And they asked me if I wanted to stay a little longer. I stayed a little longer. Well, in the next 4 years of my contract, I became hooked to the country. I was really leading a very fruitful life there. But then, after the 4 years, they asked me to come back, and I didn't want to come back. Johan took over as correspondent. And then I did hit a wall because I didn't have a plan of, like, my life. I don't have kids, so I'm very flexible. So my life developed in Washington, D.C., and I didn't have a plan. Well, that was hitting the wall, but VRT asked me to stay with them, and they promised me that I could, after a couple of years, that I could start again. So I was on a sabbatical for a year and a half. Then I started working, making reports for them for other programs, and then 2 years afterwards, I became again their correspondent. Well, that was for me the signal just to work on a backup plan and on a next plan after this, because you never know. And so, but it feels good to do that in the US because everybody does that, and you know, you're not the one that is like, oh, you're taking too much risk, and why do you leave a very certain job and a nice job at VRT? Everybody wants to work for VRT. Why do you leave that behind? Well, hitting the wall for me was not having that plan, not having the idea of what can I do else than what I'm doing right now. So yeah, I did hit the wall.
Okay, so always have a backup plan. Ladies and gentlemen, Greet de Keizer.